session. It's called Using Images for Creativity and Communication. I love using images. You might have heard the phrase, a picture paints 1,000 words. And I really do feel that images are a great way to get our students using language and talking and being creative and everything. So a lot of the activities that I'm going to share today, they're aimed at teenagers, but you'll see that they can be really easily adapted to work with younger learners and also with adults and working with different types of English as well. For example, if you're teaching business English or if you've got exam classes, you'll see that there are ways that we can adapt these activities. Okie dokie. So I'm going to start out by describing a photo to you. It's not the photo that's on screen. So if you want to close your eyes so you can see the image I'm describing more clearly, feel free. So in the picture, there's a woman and she's wearing a pink and black checked shirt. She's also wearing a silver and black cowboy hat. She's got very long, dark brown hair. And in the picture, she's giving a thumbs up sign, but she doesn't look very happy. In the background, there are some trees and some bushes, so you can tell that she's outside when the photo was taken. Okay, I'm going to show you a picture now. In the chat, what differences can you see? So remember the picture that I described and the picture that's on screen? Yep, colour's different. She's not outside. Excellent. Fantastic. Great. Yep, she's happy. Fantastic. Oh, I've got 2 thumbs up. Very good. Yeah, I said 1 thumbs up. Excellent. Hair is different. Fantastic. So I think that this is a really easy activity to do with our students, because one thing that I love about activities like this is that it allows them to make mistakes. They can say whatever they like about the picture. For example, if they can't remember cowboy hat, they could say she's wearing a baseball cap. If they can't remember the word for checked, they could say she's wearing a spotty shirt. And so it allows them to just speak more freely without worrying about being 100% correct. Also, it means that their partner has to listen to what they're saying so that they can then identify what was different about the picture that they described. Okay, so this is me, and a little bit more about me. I am many different people to or for many different people. So, for example, my name in English is Teresa, but here in Spain, most people call me Teresa, and some people call me Tere. And generally, people in the UK call me T, and my English friends here call me T as well. Um, I've got 2 sisters, so for them, I'm sis or little sis because I'm the youngest. And neither of my sisters have children, but for my friends' children, I'm Auntie T. Uh, I did some training with some teachers a while ago, and one of them started calling me Tessie, and I was too embarrassed to say that's not my name. So I'm now Tessie for them as well. And similarly for Tay, somebody started calling me Tay, and I just ended up being Tay. My husband has a cute name for me. And oh, this is my WhatsApp name, and these are my pronouns. So I think this activity as well, it's a really nice thing to do at the start of a course particularly with our teenagers who are perhaps in a process of coming to learn more about who they are, what's their identity. But also with our adults. For example, if you're working in a business environment, there might be cultural norms that people are normally called Mr. So-and-so or Ms. So-and-so, but perhaps in the English language classroom, they'd prefer to be called by their first name. I think as well, often here in Spain, you get a list, you get your register at the beginning of the year. And, there's lots of names for example, like Francisco Javier. Well, is he Francisco? Is he Javier? Is he Fran? Is he Javi? Is he Paco? And so asking the students after doing this activity, what's your name in the English classroom? It can make them feel much more welcomed, much more integrated in the classroom as well, if they feel that they're being accepted for the name that they want to be called. Okay, so a really simple activity. And obviously you don't need to do that with a picture, but it just led on from my picture description. Okay, as well, I would always start out with my names first. So I'd write all my names on the board in a cloud and talk about who I am for the different people, like I did with you, because I think it's really useful to model the tasks that we're doing with our students. It provides them with a framework, with scaffolding, perhaps of the language that they might be using. It gives them an idea of how much we want them to say as well. And I think as well, it can sometimes help them expand their ideas. For example, if I'd said, what's your name? You might just say one name. And if I said, well, what do your family call you? That's another name. But then it tends to be a lot of teacher asking the students. Whereas if you can provide them with a model task and then let them get on with it, I think that's much better for it becoming much more learner-centered. Okay. Right, we're going to do another activity now. This is one of my favorite activities ever, and my apologies if you've seen it before. It's called Definitely Maybe. So this was my rabbit. He died a few years ago. In about a minute, I'm going to tell you about my rabbit. But before I do, if you've got a piece of paper, can you predict 5 words you think I'm definitely going to say, and 5 words you think maybe I'll say? Okay, they can be any type of word, nouns, adjectives, verbs, adverbs, but not very simple words like I, the, it. Okay, so 5 words you predict I'm definitely going to say about my cute little bunny, and 5 words you think maybe I'll say. I'm going to hide the chat box so if anybody is writing them, I don't see them and use them. Okay, 30 seconds. I'm going to sip some water. Give you 10 more seconds. Obviously, if I was doing this in the classroom, I would give the learners more time, particularly as well, depending on their level and depending on the topic. Okay, don't worry if you haven't got 5 words, definitely 5 words maybe. We'll crack on so that we can get through as many tasks as possible. So now, whilst I'm talking about my bunny rabbit, you can put a tick next to any words that I say. You only need to tick them once, even if I repeat the word you have a number of times. And any form of the word is fine. So for example, if I say he ate and you have eat, give it a tick. Eat, ate, eaten, eating, eats, it's all good. Okay, so this was my bunny rabbit. And his name was Munch Bucket because the day we bought him, we took him home and he just started eating. And we went to the supermarket and we came back and he was still eating. So the name Munch Bucket stuck. He was a house rabbit. He only went outside to our little patio, so he never got to experience digging in dirt or things like that, or running around a garden. He used to love watching TV. He would come and sit on the sofa with us. And in terms of food, he ate most fruit and vegetables, obviously things like carrots and strawberries he liked. But his favorite fruit ever was watermelon. And if we had a piece of watermelon and he was out of the cage, he would literally climb up you like a mountain and try and get to the watermelon that you were trying to eat. He lived to be about 11 years old. Um, and yep, that's the story of my little bunny rabbit, Munch Bucket. Okay, so then you've been listening, you've been ticking. You get 2 points for every tick in the definitely column, and 1 point for every tick in the maybe column. So you could have a maximum of 15 points. If you got all 5 ticks here, that's 10 points, and all 5 ticks here, that's another 5 points. If you're feeling brave and you want to put how many points you got in the chat, Jennifer, well done, 5, fantastic. Oh, Kawaji, see, oh, and Una Glancy as well, 0. Not to worry. The idea of this game is that it's not so much about how many points you get. That's just a bonus, because I think sometimes our teenagers need a little bit of extra motivation. And so telling them that they get points afterwards often helps. But I love this activity for so many reasons. I think for the person who's going to speak, it gives them time to start preparing what they want to say whilst the other people are writing their predictions. So they can already start thinking about the words they're going to use, sentences, how they're going to organize their talk as well. And I think having that preparation time is really useful for our learners. Then for the students who are predicting, it's really good to start them getting a little bit of critical thinking. What words do they think are going to come up? What verbs are they going to use? What adjectives? You know, it just gets them thinking a little bit more about language. It also gives them a really clear reason to listen, which I think as well, definitely in our teens classes and sometimes as well in our adult classes, students aren't necessarily great at listening when one person is speaking. So the fact that they have to listen and tick gives them a really clear purpose. You can add an extra stage. So after the person finishes speaking, before they count up their points, the students have the opportunity to ask questions to try and elicit another word. And so that's really fun because, for example, somebody in the chat earlier wrote standing. So they might say, what's the rabbit doing in this picture? And I might say, he's eating the Christmas tree. Or I might say, he's standing and eating the Christmas tree. And so that's quite fun as well, because they have to think quite carefully about the sort of question they're going to ask, because often they'll use the word in their question, like, is the rabbit standing in this picture? Yes. So that's good as well for, again, getting them to think a little more carefully about the language they use. And then they get really frustrated when that person still doesn't say the word that they're trying to get them to use. So yeah, great. I love this activity. I tell everybody about it. It's 0 preparation. To be honest, you don't even need to use a picture. You can just say, okay, Sophia, tell us about sports. Sophia has a few minutes to prepare, students have a few minutes to predict, and off we go. Again, modeling the activity first, and then I've done it before that each week we just have a routine. It's part of the lesson. One person talks either about something related to the lesson topic or something completely free. And so everybody gets an opportunity to be the speaker. Okay. Next up, character builds. Character builds as well, I think, are fantastic. I think there's always a lot in our course books. There's a lot that's given, and I think we can do a lot more with it. So often you'll often find pictures which go with a text. And so maybe the text has information about the person who's in the image, but there's often quite a lot of just kind of placeholder images as well. Pictures of teenagers having fun, pictures of adults in business meetings. And I think they're a really great resource to get our students using a lot of the typical everyday language that they need, and particularly the sort of language that they might need for exams. Here in Spain, Cambridge exams, language cert exams, they're always very popular. And so, getting students to review the sort of language that they'll need is really important. Before I go on to the character builds, Mary says, what level would you suggest this game is most suited for? So far, all the activities we've done, you can scale for any level. So for example, definitely maybe, if it's a very low level class, it's, tell me about your favorite sport. You might say, okay, think of 3 words they'll definitely say, 3 words they'll maybe say. But then the person speaking, they can say things like, my favorite sport is football. I play football on Mondays after school. I play football with my friends. I think you can really scale it to any sort of level. And Laura says, what did I call the first 2 games? Incorrect picture description is the one where you describe something incorrectly. Good name. Who am I was just my introduction for using different names in the classroom, and then definitely maybe. And we are now on to character builds. So if I was doing this in the in-person classroom, I would get the students in pairs, get them answering these questions. And one thing that I love about this activity is there are no wrong answers. So one group might say his name is Marco. Another group might say his name is James. Another group might say his name is LeBron. They can come up with any name that they like. Same for all of these questions. For this one, what are his hobbies? They might use some of the information that's in the picture, but they've still got the opportunity to be creative and think about different things. Okay, and we can also take these character builds to a further level. So imagine we're working with particular language, a particular structure in our lessons. We can create questions for that specific topic. So for example, here we've got some questions about the future. Here we've got some questions about the past. Here we've got some questions about routines, and here we've got some adjectives and dependent prepositions. Okay, so again, an activity that you can easily adapt to different levels. Routines, A1, A2 level, even kind of talking about future, we're getting into later A1, A2. But then you could use it even for higher levels with mixed conditionals, like if he wasn't sitting at his desk now, what would he be doing? Okay, and things like that. So yeah, unfortunately, we won't practice it because it would be a lot of typing in the chat. But like I say, any type of language that you want to use, find a picture in your course book or find a picture on Unsplash, Canva, Pexels. They all have free images that you can use and share with your students if you credit them. And so there's lots of resources out there that you can use. And thinking about this for lower levels, when I've done this before with younger learners, I like to get them creating the character as well. So we'll often create a monster in the lesson. So we'll have a blank board, and then I'll say, okay, let's draw a monster. Naomi, is the monster tall or short? And Naomi gets to say tall. I say, okay, everybody, the monster is tall. And everybody repeats, the monster is tall. Then we go on to how many eyes does it have? Jaime, how many eyes does the monster have? 5. The monster's got 5 eyes. Everybody, the monster's got 5 eyes. So we're getting them as well. We're taking them beyond just single word answers. And we're getting them to use chunks of language as well, which I think is really important with our young learners. Well, with any level, the more that we can take them beyond single words and into chunks and even better into sentences, the better their development will be. They'll internalize these chunks of language more easily. There was a question just here as well. If you're teaching online, do students answer orally or in the chat? So with any type of picture description, I would generally put students into breakout rooms, into pairs or groups of 3, because I think as much as they can be speaking, it's better for them. Typing, it's great, but it generally takes longer. You might have some students who are absolute whizzes and can type at 1,000 words a minute, but generally they're going to be much more fluent speaking in terms of the speed. So yes, I would put them into breakout rooms. I'd go around and monitor, and then bring them back, and then maybe invite one person to say what they thought about the character, and then say, okay, in this group, how was your person similar or different? So as well, it gets them to share their ideas. And yep, great comment here as well about using illustrations to reinforce vocabulary, which is great. Yep, I think the more that we can recycle, reuse, review vocabulary as well, the more our learners will internalize it. Okay, so back to our monster. So on the board, we're slowly creating this character. And obviously we're doing all the physical things, but then as well, we can introduce these other aspects. So what's his favorite sport? Does he have a pet? And for each of these sentences, we're drilling those chunks of language. Then, once we have our monster on the board, I would go through the whole monster again, drilling the sentences. So the monster's got long curly hair. The monster's got 3 eyes. The monster's got 4 teeth. The monster's favorite food is pizza. I think as well, getting them to use this rhythm can really help in terms of identifying which are the important words in the sentence. Once I've drilled all the sentences, then I would point to a part and ask the student, I would elicit the sentence. So then they might revert back to curly hair. And so then you would use your gestures to try and encourage them to build it back into a sentence. And again, drill it if they need that support. So then once you've gone through all the body parts asking, then you can put them into pairs and say, okay, remember, can you tell your partner about the monster? Remember? And then again, going round and monitoring. That obviously it depends on how old your learners are. With your very young learners, they're not so good at managing turn taking and conversation and tasks like that. So I would probably just stop after eliciting the sentences from them. And if we're going up to higher levels, to adults as well, there's plenty of business English images out there that you can find as well. And I think as well, often course books are filled with happiness. Often people tend to be in good conditions, they tend to be happy and healthy, etc. And so using other images that we find, it allows us to bring in different situations and things that might be missing from our course book as well. So again, you can find any image, you can write the questions the first time, and then maybe another time get the students to write the questions because as well, often, certainly here in Spain, question formation tends to be a bit of an issue because Spanish doesn't have auxiliary verbs, or it doesn't use them in the same way as English does. So anything that we can get to get our students creating questions as well is great. Okie dokie. Right, we are going to do an activity now of writing in the chat. This one is called missing letter sentences. And again, it's an activity that you can use with images from your coursebook materials, or you can find lots of great free to use images online. So in the chat, can you write a sentence about this picture, but you can't use the letter A? Now, that doesn't mean that you can write sentences like, no, you have to create real words, but you can't have words which have the letter A, okay? So I'll give you a quick 30 seconds, see who can write a question. Una Clancy, I don't know whether this is difficult, but if that's your sentence about the picture, that's very smart. Lizzie's got a great one as well. They're enjoying their time on the court. They are pursuing a, can't have are, we could have there, we could have the contraction. What else? We've got two people compete on court. The men enjoy outside or enjoy being outside. Two friends exercise. Excellent. Who's throwing the object? Fantastic. And Noah's already extending the sentence. Fantastic. So then you can add another layer of difficulty. So we've started off with a letter that you can't use. This time we'll have a letter that you can't use, so the letter T, and you have to use present progressive, present continuous. Okay. The sun is shining. Oh, but we can't have the letter T. I don't know whether that was for this sentence or for the original one. He is dribbling the ball. Fantastic. Two guys dribbling. Two. Got a T there. Oh, yeah, remember we can't have a letter T. Boys are playing in a driveway. Excellent. Jay and Dan are playing ball. Fantastic. You guys are great at this. Who is winning? I think you are. Okay, so then adding another level of challenge. You can't use the letter D. You have to use the past simple. So that means no regular verbs. And you have to use 10 or more words in your sentence. It's getting more challenging. The sentences aren't coming as quickly now. So whilst you're thinking, obviously there are some combinations which work really well. So the letter D and past simple, because like I say, that wipes out any regular verbs. Great, these guys met at the court and they went to the basketball court to settle a score. Perfect, great work, Jennifer. Yeah, so there's some combinations that work really well. There are obviously as well some combinations that do not work. So for example, you couldn't have present progressive and no letter N. Or you couldn't have past perfect and no letter D. So you do need to think a little bit beforehand what you want to use, what combinations you want to use. Fantastic. Great filler if you've got 5 minutes at the end of the lesson, just bring up any picture. And it does add that little bit of competitive element as well, because again, you can kind of get them to read out their sentence and then they have to listen. And it does tend to be those really silly words, you know, the grammar words like and, the, that often trip them up as well. They're very good at not using the forbidden letter in their verbs and in their nouns and things like that, but all those tricky little grammar words often get them. Fantastic. Okay. been talking quite quickly for a while now. So I'm going to calm down a little. And if you'd like to, I'd like you to close your eyes and imagine you're on a beach. So have a think. Are you alone? Are you with other people? What can you see around you? Is the beach busy? Is it open? Is it wild? What can you hear around you? Are there birds? Can you hear the water? Imagine you take off your socks and shoes. What do you feel under your feet? There's sand, stones. Imagine you put your foot in the water. How does the water feel? Is it cold or warm? What's the weather like? Is the sun on your skin? Is there a little wind? How are you feeling right now? Oh, okay. So that's an activity that we call a guided visualization. And I love guided visualizations. So I think often, particularly with teenagers, the first time you do them, they can be a little giggly. Perhaps they don't feel comfortable closing their eyes. It's absolutely fine to say, stare at the ceiling, stare at the floor. The idea is just that there's no distractions, so they can focus. And then you guide them through this visualization. So you give them very gentle questions to help them think and mentally visualize where they are. So when you're asking your questions, when you're planning your questions, make sure that they're graded to the level of your students. Okay, because the idea of these guided visualizations is it gets the students into a very relaxed state. So if you introduce vocabulary that they don't know, it makes them jump. They think, oh, I don't know that word. Now I can't concentrate because I don't know that word. Okay, so keep the language very simple. As well, keep your voice calm as much as possible. And if you're doing this in the in-person classroom, stay in one position. Because again, if you're getting students into this relaxed state, if they can sense that someone is moving around, it can make them feel a bit uncomfortable. So simple language, calm voice, stay in one place, and try and include as many of the senses as possible. So things you can see, things you can hear, maybe things you can smell as well. Taste is a little more difficult, but then as well, the physical sensation. So that can be physical touch, like taking off your socks and shoes. What can you feel? Or reaching out to touch something. As well, the weather. Maybe if it's sunny, you can feel the sun on your skin, or if there's a breeze, you can feel your hair moving. And also your emotions. So getting students to think about how they feel emotionally towards the end of the visualization. And so when you finish the visualization, also end it calmly. Don't go, okay, off we go, let's do something else. So now when you're ready, open your eyes and tell your partner what you imagined. And so then another reason I love visualizations is they're so personalized. The students at the time when they're going through the visualization, they haven't needed to produce any language. So it's all been what they've seen. And so then you'll find that often when they're talking to their partners, there's vocabulary that they want to use but don't have. So that's great in terms of monitoring, listening into their conversations, picking up on what emergent language your students need. And depending on the level of the students, you might want to give them time before they share to jot down some notes. Okay, and then that's a point as well where they can kind of say, oh, how do you say when the water comes, the waves? Okay, so then you can feed in the language for them at that point as well. So yeah, I love guided visualizations. Like I say, it can be uncomfortable the first time you do them, but if you work at them, I think they're just a wonderful experience for students as well. We've had a great question here as well from Caroline, or Carolyn, sorry. How can missing letter game be tailored for low-level students? Again, you could choose more difficult, or easier letters for them not to use. So things like F and D. But I think, again, any picture that you show a student, if they can make a sentence about it, they can make a sentence without a letter. And it just gets them to think a little more. Things like the letter T, the letter S might be more of a challenge for them, and the vowels would be more of a challenge. But I still think, it just encourages them to think more about the sort of words that they do know and the sort of sentences that they can create. Okie dokie. So if your students aren't keen on doing guided visualizations, or you're not keen on trying it with them, you can kind of lead them up to it. So before you get to the visualization stage, you can do this activity, which is called 8-way thinking. And this is based around the idea of multiple intelligences. So Howard Gardner had this idea that, we don't learn just in one way. And, there's lots of different facets to the way that we learn. And I think although he never said either that you're a particular type of learner, you're not a linguistic learner, you're not a naturalistic learner. But I think in terms of thinking about these different multiple intelligences and how we can bring these different elements into our classes, it gets students thinking about things in a different way. It gets them using different language as well. So these questions are based on these 8 intelligences. So for example, the interpersonal, the relationship with other people. Is this guy alone? Intrapersonal, how does it feel being where you are? How does being in nature make you feel? Linguistic, mathematical, so working with numbers. Musical, working with sounds. Visual, naturalistic, and this kinesthetic, this movement as well. So you could, the first time you do this, again, give the students the picture, give them the questions. They could either have the questions on paper and they could work with a partner immediately, or you could project the picture, say, imagine you're this person. Imagine where you are. Are you alone? How do you feel being in nature? And I think, again, guiding them through these questions, pausing to give them time to think about their answers, and then putting them into pairs to discuss the questions, gives them the opportunity to use lots of different language. Okie dokie. Right, we've got one more quick activity, and I'm going to tell you a story. So, again, if you want to, you can close your eyes. It's not a bedtime story, but feel free. Once upon a time, there was a guy called Dave. He was at home one day playing video games. Okay, so doing this in the class, I would tell the students the first part of the story and then project these questions and get them to discuss. So what does Dave look like? Which room is he in? What does the room look like? What game is he playing? Again, no wrong answers. There's nothing in the story that I've told that tells them this information, but they can imagine who this character is. Okay, so then we move on to the next bit. Suddenly, Dave's phone buzzed. It was a message from his friend. Dave grabbed his jacket. Okay, so then again, some other questions for them to think about. You might give them time to think on their own, so then they can be, again, asking you for the vocabulary that they want, and then get them to compare in pairs, maybe do a little bit of feedback. Who did you think messaged him? What does his jacket look like? Oh, you said leather jacket. What you said a denim jacket. Okay. It just gives them the opportunity to be a bit creative. Next part of the story. Dave left the house and walked along the street. He saw a neighbour and walked over. They started talking. Okay, so again, getting them to create more of this story. We've gone from a single person to another character to now thinking about the location much more as well. And then the final question is, what happened next? Okay, so then they can finish off the story. And this is a really lovely way to start them off with some creative writing. I think sometimes when we ask our students to write stories, they get overwhelmed. Whereas at least if we can give them a bit of a, not even a plot, there's not really any plot that we've decided so far. We've just got a man who's got a message and left the house and met a neighbor. That's not really a story. So they get to fill in all the details. Okay, fantastic. So, thank you very much to Teaching House and to Lizzie for inviting me. Thank you very much, Lizzie, for sharing. I run an online group on Facebook called the TEFL Development Hub, and we have webinars, we have Wednesday questions to get you reflecting on your teaching and your practice if you're beyond teaching, if you're a materials writer or something. You can find the slides. And also there's a little QR code there. You can connect with me on LinkedIn and anything else. Lovely to meet you all.